I have a question for you. What is the proper method of relieving pawn tension? Whenever you create central tension, try to maximize all of your pieces first. That way, when the tension is released, you will be better able to take advantage of the open lines. Keep in mind that in the positions you're about to see, if black buckles first and breaks the central tension, your development lead and more active position will be enhanced.
This first example will illustrate how white keeps the tension in the center, maximizes his pieces, and then we'll follow up with the piece trades. C4, knight f6, knight c3, e6, d4, d5, knight f3, continuing with development, bishop to e7, bishop to g5, knight b to d7, pawn to e3, castle, and queen c2, c5, and now capturing on d5. How should white continue? Capturing in the center, h4, answering a threat with a threat. You take my knight, I'll take your bishop. Check.
White plays the pawn to b4 in order to buy time, which also enables him to demonstrate his board dominance.
Notice the weakness of black's pawn on h7. Both the queen and the rook
X-ray the pawn on h7.
And remember what I've said a number of times before, that strong central activity or a strong position in the center supports an uncastled king. And you will see why. Sacrificing the queen on h7 check. The only move is to recapture. Now, how does white continue? With knight takes? No. The answer is pawn takes. Discover check. And it doesn't matter what black does at this point. King to g6. And knight e7 is checkmate. And a king to g8. Knight to e7 is checkmate. Rooks belong on open files.
In this next segment of the video, you're going to see various examples where white uses the d-pawn as a weapon to break open the center. We know that after bishop to g5, black castles. And after castling queen d2, knight a5, and bishop c2, followed by pawn to b5. Now, before we continue on, we're going to get some advice from one of the king's nobles.
In a chess position, there are some key attributes. Being aware of these attributes and understanding them during play is important in order to better assess a chess position. For example, in chess there is a general rule that states Trade pieces when you're ahead in material, but trade pawns when you're behind in material. However, this is a general rule that is too broad that depends on other factors.
And I will be discussing some of those factors in this part of the video. Okay, after rook to a7, in the game, knight to e5 was played. Already, the bishop is on a good diagonal on c2. The rooks are connected, and the knight, queen, and bishop on the king's side are developed and placed strategically. In this position, a good move would be to break through the center with d5. It's time to break open the center. E takes d5, rook on f to e1, bishop e6, knight d4, queen d7, bishop f5, bishop d6, queen f3, bishop takes f5, knight takes f5. And notice the pressure on black's pawn on d5. Three pieces attack the pawn on d5. Knight e5, queen h3. Now the threat here is bishop takes f6, followed by knight h6 check, and queen takes the queen on d7. Knight on e to g4 to block that. Knight takes d6, queen takes d6, and now knight takes d5. Knight takes d5 and queen takes g4. Both of white's rooks occupy the open D and E files, and white's king side has no weaknesses. Okay, we've already seen that in this position, white played d5. Here, we're going to continue with knight to e5. And this leads to rook c7, knight takes c4, b takes c4 was played. And now, should black capture the knight on f6 or continue with central development with rook on f to e1? Let's take a look at rook on f to e1. And this is the continuation. g6, queen e5, rook to b7, d5. d5 again, d5, playing in the center. Knight g4. Now the factor here is the knight attacks the queen, and also the bishop and queen has a double hit on the bishop on g5. How does white continue? By capturing on e7. And now queen takes e7 and queen g3. The queen on e7 is in a pin, and now Rook takes b2, pawn to d6, advancing the pawn, being 2 squares away from promotion, and now queen a7. Now the threat is rook takes the bishop on c2, and also the queen and the knight eyes the pawn on f2. That's currently defended by the queen on g3. And now rook e2, pawn to f5, knight a4 hitting the rook, rook b5, queen f4, knight f6, queen takes c4, bishop d7, and bishop b3. There's an X-ray on the pawn on e6. Rook d5. Rook takes d5, pawn takes d5, and now queen f4. Keeping an eye on the pawn on d6. Okay, I'm going to conclude with this last example. And then I'll continue this lesson in another video or in the next video. So here, white traps the rook or blocks the rook by playing the bishop to b3. And the line continues with bishop to g5 with the idea of being able to play the rook to d2. Now, the two moves here, or main moves, are d6 for white, pawn to d6, or pawn to h4. The actual move played was the pawn to d6. But the move here is pawn to h4. And after, let's say, bishop to f4. Bishop to f4 was played. But the question is, what happens if the bishop takes the pawn on h4? If bishop takes pawn on h4, then knight a4. And now the rook cannot go to d2. Has no other choice other than to capture the bishop on b3 by playing rook takes b3. And white wins the exchange. So bishop to f4, and now knight to e4 is played here, with the idea of being able to guard against queen takes h4 and being able to play the pawn to g3 for the fort. But what happens if knight to a4? Then if knight to a4, then queen takes h4. Now the threat is checkmate on h2. And pawn to g3 is forced. And after queen here, knight takes rook, bishop takes pawn, and after the recapture, now it's a perpetual. Okay, let's go back. So knight to e4 is the move to play here. And after queen takes h4, now pawn to g3. Queen to h3, and now knight f6 check. King g7, pawn takes. Now the queen can't go to g4 at this moment. But after the king captures, and then in between move. Pawn takes pawn on e5, king g7, and queen d4. Okay, that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for my next video.